All right, I do apologize. Evidently, I have been muted, and I appreciate the the heads up. Let me start over again. I am Rollinwolf, and this is Let's Talk Daggerheart Beta 1.5. At the end of the first episode, I had stated that episode 2 would be character creation covering ancestries, communities, and classes. That is quite a bit of content to go over in one episode, and I think that would make for a very long episode, and one that by the time we got through it all, you may or may not have retained what we discussed the whole time. And there's also the section that I didn't even mention domains, which are a big thing, and some other aspects to character creation, as well as the shared understanding that kind of forms it's not like a campaign frame per se, but more of like a foundational understanding of the setting, to have a bit of shared understanding between whether you're playing in my campaign, you're playing in a friend's campaign, you're making your own campaign. If you follow these kind of shared understandings, then it will make it much easier to proceed whenever you are at a session 0 and trying to decide concepts and aims and tones and campaign frames and all of that. So that is what we're going to be covering in this episode, and then we will move on and we will do ancestries and communities, and we will break down and do kind of an in-depth touch on classes, as well as the domains, at least the first level abilities, or the tier 1 choices that you have access to. We'll go over those. Probably at this time we will not delve into like the further down the road domain abilities and stuff. I will leave that to everybody to look at on their own. Real quickly though, let me cover the community licensing and get that done real quick. Sorry, I've got it written down right here. Okay, so this product was created using the Darrington Press Community Gaming License, the Illuminated Worlds Standard Resource Document, Darrington Press LLC, all rights reserved. This is in particular referencing the Beta 1.5 rules. The finished product will be out in the spring of 2025, and this is to cover that gap until then. All right, so let us get started with discussing the core realms. So let's get... Okay, so what are we talking about when we're talking about core realms? So this is kind of like, think of it as like your understanding of the cosmos, right? And this is very generalized and very blanket and open-ended. You can give your campaign as much or as little credence to this as you would like, but it should have at least like rumors, stories that can trace back to this. Even if you want to establish a different foundation in your setting, in your particular campaign, something that might not fit quite into this, you can always, as long as there's references of this being lore, things like that, then you can do what you want with it. But it's with what is in Daggerheart. This is kind of the basis of that cosmos that they've created. And so let's start off with the mortal realm. So the mortal realm, in the earliest age, was created. Stories say that the mortal realm was created by the forgotten gods in the earliest age. That during the earliest age, the new gods overthrew the forgotten gods and banished many of them to the mortal realm for eternity. The mortal realm, and the mortal realm is going to be your prime material plane. This is going to be where the majority of your adventures and campaigns are going to take place. Not saying that you can't journey to the other planes or the other realms, but this is, for the most part, probably going to be where most campaigns take place. Is going to be the mortal realm. That mortal realm being, like I said, the forgotten gods, the original gods that created everything in the earliest age, they lost the war, like, in the hollows above, to the new gods. And many of them were banished to the mortal realm for eternity. Does not say all of them were banished. So you could have some forgotten gods that still have realms up in the hollows above. Some of them could have been cast down to the circles below and seen as fallen. But we'll get into that as we proceed. The other thing that's interesting about the mortal realm is that the faint divinities that were created to oversee the mortal realm. These were created by both forgotten and new gods, but they're minor deities, demigods, spirits. It's an endless option of what you want them to be. It's very, very open-ended, but they exist here in the mortal realm as well, and do reside here. So these divine beings can be in your realm, in your mortal realm, or at least there are stories that say they exist in the mortal realm. Then we go to the hollows above. These are like the celestial realms, the home of the gods. It's a collection of realms where many gods reside. They could have their own separate realms. They could have shared, there could be some shared realms within certain aspects of the divinities. That is all left up to you and your table. The hollows above were claimed by the new gods at the end of the earliest age, after having a war with the forgotten gods, and it is also rumored and legend that many of the great calamities of the mortal realm have been caused because it is legend and rumored that whenever a god wishes to leave their realm and come to the mortal realm, that there's always some sort of sacrifice that must be paid for doing so, and that has caused some of the not necessarily all of the great calamities, but some of the great calamities of your game world have been attributed or could be contributed to these different times where the gods have either traveled from the divine realm to the mortal realm, or maybe have some sort of undue influence. Whatever your table wants to do with that and how impactful it is to your campaign, that is your decision. But it is something that is kind of in the lore, that this could be a reason for some of the calamities, an explanation. Then you have the circles below. Circles below are the realms of the fallen. So the fallen, there was a war also in the earliest age, at the end of the earliest age, between the new gods and the fallen gods. So the forgotten gods are just, they're the original OG gods. It does not specify whether they're good, evil. It says many of them were banished to the mortal realm, obviously, not to the same degree that the fallen were banished to the circles below. They lost the divine war at the end of the earliest age, and were and basically have been branded as, evil practitioners of tainted magic. This is like, because the Forgotten Gods are not necessarily evil or tainted magic or anything like that. They're just the original old guard that got booted out by the new gods. And many of them reside in the mortal realm. So these are kind of like what would be considered the demons, the devils, the evil. Rumors also abound that powerful arcane magics used for great evil purposes can open up rifts between the circles below and the mortal realm, allowing fallen to open up through these portals and these weakened barriers and obtain access to the mortal realm. So you've got the mortal realm, the hollows above, the circles below, and then you have the realms beyond. The realms beyond are encompassing of everything that doesn't fit into those first three. Some examples that they list are the elemental realms, the astral plane, the astral realm, the valley of death, basically, where you go and wait until your soul is claimed, your spirit is claimed by some other divinity, or you're judged if you don't have a patron or a god that is interested in your soul in particular. You've got, and then endless others, whatever your campaign needs as far as other planes of existence. If you have some sort of Fey realm or an alternate plane of existence, shadow realms, any kind of pocket dimensions you want to throw in, realms that you want to create would be considered the realms beyond if you do not put them in one of the other categories. We can go into that, but I believe that is more a table-to-table decision on how involved that's going to be. That's definitely your catch-all for any other planes that you need or any other realms that you need to create. Should be considered the realms beyond. And you can pretty much do with that what you want. It's very open-ended. There's not a lot there that's restricting you or confining you to any specific thing in these. It is just a way for everybody, whenever they sit down at their session 0, to have a common understanding and a bit of ability to have the basis of the most broadest terms of their cosmology and understanding of how they perceive the universe. And then you and your players, or you and your game master, and your fellow players can define and give flesh and form to these core ideas and realms. So that pretty much covers the cores. And like I said, it is very bare bones. It is there for you to have just the beginnings of an architecture and a frame to set your campaign up, and let other people who may be new to you or new to your GMing coming together for the first time. Everybody that plays Daggerheart is going to have this, and so if you want to make exceptions to this, you should let people know that at the jump. Otherwise, people are going to assume that this is the common understanding, and that should be the default that you start from on your cosmos. If you want to change it, talk to your table, talk to your GM, and work together to do so. Like I said, no gaming police are going to come and bang down your door. But if you're going to change it, have a good reason for changing it. Otherwise, let it ride. Let it ride. As I stated in the first episode, I do think that, and let me go ahead and get down just so y'all can see my little notes that I have there for the circle below and the realms beyond as well. And this this is really a nice little common understanding for everybody to have, and there really is nothing in here that is so set in stone that you cannot adjust. And like I said, if you don't want to have faint divinities in your campaign for whatever reason, let them take a back seat. Let them be more legend and myth. And maybe in the game you'll discover faint divinities, or if it's something you don't want, let everybody know, hey, we're not doing faint divinities, and let everybody come to a consensus on that. But definitely address anything that you're going to take out of this shared understanding, if that is something that you are going to alter. I think that is a good little cover of those core realm concepts. Let's move on to a few other things before we get into our next episode, where we start going into actual character creation and the bits that make up your character. I do want to take a moment to address some other things that I believe fall into this shared understanding portion of Daggerheart. And that is going to be the way magic is and spells. So magic both permeates the land and the people in Daggerheart. It is powerful, dangerous. It can be both interior, as in coming from oneself, and manipulate out, or you can choose to have your character manipulate the existing magic that flows throughout the lands, taps into the latent magic in the world, or manipulates it. Both internal magic and environmental or external magic are capable of both being tapped into and harnessed. This is something that goes into the you should flavor as you desire to, but mechanics should not change. The only time they should change is if there is a total consensus at the table and everybody agrees that yes, it's okay to change the mechanics on X, Y, or Z. I advise that you generally avoid changing the mechanics, and so Daggerheart advises also to avoid it if you don't necessarily need to change the mechanics. And you, I think, can probably do what you would like to do without having to change mechanics. And maintain the balance and be able to support the fiction that you want to tell and the narrative that you are spinning. And this doesn't go just for magic and spells, but this flavor as desired concept carries over throughout Daggerheart. And we'll get into that more whenever we get out towards the end of the section here. But you should definitely be comfortable and expect for people to want to flavor their magic to fit and suit their characters. I encourage you to allow a diverse and very magical world to be formed that fits into what Daggerheart is supposed to be. So you don't have to have the monolithic, oh, this is the way and the only way, and you don't have to worry about the structure of other more, I would say, crunchy, mechanic focused systems. This one is driven by the fiction, it is driven by the narrative, it is driven by you and your table. And everything is meant in this system to serve that purpose and to serve the story that you want to tell. So I think it is very easy and very acceptable to change the flavor on things, reskin things, make it work for you and your table. And this, once you realize that you can do this so easily, I think you will find it is it's a big change, and it's a lot of relief of pressure on having to figure out how do I work in player A's desire to do this or have this weapon or whatever the X factor is that's in other games might totally bring things to a halt. You can easily figure out what works best for that player, their idea, and the fiction, and you apply it. It is that simple. It is that easy. Like I said, you should avoid changing mechanics. It's not generally, from what I have seen, I don't think there will be a lot of need to change mechanics. Once the rules come out, I'm sure they will give us all the tools that we need to be able to create new things that we want to see in the game. If we don't have a good X, Y, or Z in place, but I think it will be hard pressed for, I think, a player to bring something that just will not be able to be addressed by reskinning something that already exists in the game. That being said, I'm sure your players will bring you challenging situations that will make you scratch your head. We will get into some of that as we go through this series on flavoring things and tips and tricks on how to do that, how to approach that with your game master if you don't agree, game masters, how to adjust expectations or address situations where a player is wanting something that just does not balance out with what is there. And that's why I advise against changing mechanics around. The more you can make things work as is and don't make an exception here or there, you will be able to stop the landslide of pebbles that once you move this one, then this pebble comes down and this pebble comes down, and next thing you know, you've got your balance and it's gone because you've let so many things slip by, little things that then add up to bigger things, and now you've got a mechanical mess over here that is not something that you realized, but 3 levels down the road, there's another domain ability that this player has now chosen that makes that simple mechanical change at the beginning now into something that is just game breaking or, in your eyes, not balanced. And it may not be that it's something that you find unbalanced. Maybe one of your other players is upset, or whatever the situation is. If you try and reskin and change things around without doing mechanical changes and find what works best for the fiction that is being asked for, then you will be able to have better protection against those rock slides. So, my advice to you, avoid it if at all possible. And if it's something that just makes sense for everybody's table and it works, then go for it. And also, don't be afraid to reel it in later if it's discovered that this is a mechanical change was made that should not have been made, or it worked then, but now because of these new factors and things that you didn't see at level 1 whenever you started, now it makes sense why the mechanics were the way they were, and that this new change compounded with this other ability now makes that earlier change drastically unfair or unbalanced. And address that. Don't just let it slide and become an issue at the table. If you see it and you know it's something that needs to be addressed, then discuss it. Maybe it's just a simple agreement of like, hey, we'll keep the flavor of this, but we need to change that mechanic back. Or when you're using this ability by itself, that's fine. But if you're going to combine it with this ability, then that needs to be adjusted. Work with your players, work with your GM. Don't let your campaign come to a screeching halt over something that can be remedied. I'll step off my soapbox there, and we'll move on to tokens. Now, tokens are something that everybody should have. Every player needs a minimum of 7. I would recommend having anywhere from 10 to a dozen. They need to be unique for each player because you're going to be putting these tokens onto the action tracker for combats to keep track of how many actions everybody individually is taking. Since there are not initiatives and you're following the fiction, it's a good way for a GM or players to be able to look and see, okay, well, player A's got 2 tokens on the tracker, player B's got a token on the tracker, player C's got 3 tokens on the tracker, and player D, who has had a couple opportunities but has went ahead and let things move to other players, still doesn't have a tracker on the table, or a token on the tracker. So you may want to suggest, hey, let's check in with player D. You've been quiet. What's going on with you? Do you have an action to take? Or are you just back aghast and taking everything in, waiting for specific things to happen? But it's a good way for you to keep an eye on participation from the group as the GM. And you need these tokens because you will be removing these tokens whenever you take actions for the adversaries on their turn, or you may have environmental factors that require you to remove a token or spend a token from the tracker to enact. So that is why they need to be unique. The other use for the tokens is to track your modifiers. Whenever you're getting ready to make a duality dice roll or any kind of roll, you pop these tokens over so that way you don't forget. Because how many times have you went to make a roll the die, and forgotten to add your +1 for this or your +2 for that? So in this situation, with these tokens, you can use these tokens, and say you got a +1 from your instinct, and then you've got a +1 from a bonus from some other source, right? So in order to not forget those whenever you make your roll, you'll put 2 of your tokens over with your duality dice. When you get ready to roll, you will roll your duality dice, and then you will add the tokens at the end, and that will be your total. So like I say, it's just a mental reminder. It's a physical little bit to remind you that you've got a +2 to those dice, or +3, or whatever it may be. You could also have some, if there's negatives to the roll, you could, as the GM, you could have some tokens to throw over that way. Although I'm not necessarily concerned that will be as much of an issue as some other things. But the other use for these tokens is that there will be some spells or abilities that ask you to place tokens on the card, either whenever they're being used or at the beginning of a session. You may put X amount of tokens on an ability or a spell. The cards themselves will direct you to when you need to do that, and the number of tokens that you could need for that purpose. So that is why I would recommend at least 10. It's not going to hurt you to have a few more. And the other thing about these tokens is, if you're playing in person, you can definitely use these to help represent the individuality of your character, or what is important to your character, whether it be something that if you're a crafty person, you could create little tokens yourself. You could find things that are specifically of interest to your character, or create them. Or you can simply use whatever you happen to have lying around. You could use some pennies for one person, some buttons for somebody else. If any of you played Magic or have tap stones, things like that, whatever you need to get can be used. You just want to make sure that you've got a different set for each person that's unique. So that way you can, whenever the action tracker is out for combats or any kind of situation where you've got an ongoing back and forth with the action tracker, because you might have action trackers out for scenarios that are not necessarily combat, but some other situation where you do need in the moment kind of the ability to jump in and do this or that. It could be a social engagement or anything of import that you want to track moment from moment when you break out the action tracker. So the other thing, game cards. Now, if you download the beta material, you'll get copies of these. If you do not have a copy of these, I recommend that you write out your card. Yes, the whole card. It's all of, maybe, I don't think you'll find more than a paragraph on any of the cards. But write it out entirely. Even if you have a copy, I would encourage you to still write it out, because whenever you write that out, it puts it into your head just a little bit more. It will help you remember it easier, and help you to know what it is that you actually do. And that's why you should write out the whole card. Is because how many times have you been in a situation where you thought that you knew what you were going to do, and you had your spell picked out, and you only read the first line of the spell. You didn't read the complete spell. So you're ready to do your amazing thing, only to find out that your amazing thing isn't going to work because you didn't read the rest of the spell, and that first line has conditions to it. Or situations that make it where the thing that you want to do with it doesn't quite work the way you had hoped it would. The great thing about, I think one of the great things about Daggerheart, in my opinion, is that these abilities that you have and that you will gain throughout your character's progression through levels and the campaign, you will have everything you need on these cards. You're not gonna have to be going back and going, okay, let me go grab the book and find my spell and figure out, the nitty-gritty details of it. It's all right there on that card. So if you have a copy of it or you write it down, then you've got your reference right there in front of you. Everything you need to know. That's what the rules state about it. And everything else falls within the mechanics of it. There's not, it's pretty elegant system, in my opinion. And so, for that reason, there is no reason why after a session or two, you should not know your abilities, know what your card says. It's kind of an important deal, because whenever you don't know exactly what your card says, or how your abilities work, that can cause problems at the table and bog the game down. Now, luckily, like I said, with Daggerheart, it's going to be pretty streamlined and shouldn't take more than a moment or two to suss it all out and figure out how to move forward with the narrative. But if you know already, if you know your cards, you will have expectations and an understanding of what it is that you can do, and it should be pretty straightforward. There will always be some back and forth, some negotiating, if you will, and I do believe, and when I say negotiating, I mean negotiating. This game is more interactive and collaborative than any other RPG I've played in. I know there's some systems out there that are totally diceless. There's one that I've never played called Amber, that's been around for years and years and years and years. And it uses no dice at all. And I'm not familiar with it, so I can't speak much on it, but this is definitely a more collaborative game. And I've played a little bit of Dungeon World and some other things. I've watched some Apocalypse World campaigns, so I'm familiar with some of the more modern concept type games that are more freeform. And I think that this is a very good, healthy mix between a very freeform game and a very crunchy RPG that is like that perfect kind of happy mix of the middle, where you've got the mechanics you need to be able to tell a structured story that everybody will have a shared expectation on, as far as how to expect things to resolve. That is going to fluctuate, of course, between GMs and players, and how well Session 0 was covered, how well everybody is on the same page when it comes to big picture things. And that is why Session 0 is so important, and why it is your job as a game master to kind of lead the way on what you are going to be expecting from players and what you're going to allow players to contribute. And I encourage you to embrace letting them bring in parts of the fiction to inform the world. The more you get your players invested into the world that you and the story that you are all creating, and the more collaborative it is, the more trust they're going to put in your hands as to those moments of deciding those answers of what happens and feeling satisfied, whether it's a successful resolution or if it's a failure. And your game and your character should have both, right? You should celebrate your successes and your failures. That's why I know people who don't like characters to have any bad qualities at all. They look at it very mechanically and just want to be the best as they can and be the hero and be as powerful as they possibly can. That's great for a video game, not so great for fiction, for a story, for a movie, for a book, for a role-play game. You should embrace your character's failures as much as you celebrate their victories. These are the moments. These are the epic moments, right? These are the things that your character can rise up from. These are the low moments in the point that where you get the opportunities to come back from, or just moments of despair. All of our favorite fiction has these moments. Not every ending is a happy ending, but this is more of the in-betweens, I would say. Although, depending on the campaign that you're playing and the story that you're telling at the table, you might have one of those tragic endings at a table. And if that works for the people at the table, then that's okay. And it should be celebrated as well. Some people love a good tearjerker, but it should not. The end of the campaign should not feel dissatisfying to those that have invested all of the time into the campaign. Whether it is a successful ending or a not successful ending, it should still be a satisfying ending. And another thing with Daggerheart is you have a lot of control over your character's death. And they have a lot more, you as the player have a lot more say on when and if your character departs from the campaign than in traditional role-playing games. And we'll get into all of that. I don't want to derail too far away into that at this moment, but I encourage you to embrace the game. And the last thing we're going to cover here is flavoring your game. And this is something that is at the heart of Daggerheart, is flavoring the game to your taste. Your player has a concept for a weapon that's not in the book. That's easy. You can very easily take whatever appropriate, and it's going to be, and a lot of that's going to depend on the class that they're playing, on the idea that they have, but take the mechanics for something that exists, reskin it, and that's fine. You can do the same thing with armor. Armor does not have to be armor. You can have a character that has magical runes, and that's their armor. They still have to spend armor slots. They still can end up with no accessible armor, because as you spend those slots, they go away. You got to repair it. And how do you repair runes? Well, whereas that's all in the fiction. It's all narrative. So instead of being over there with the warrior who's replacing a buckle or redoing a strap or cinching up a bit of chainmail with some leather thong that he's connecting, whatever he's doing to apply and repair his armor slots, or hers, or theirs. You can do the same thing with your magical slots by, sitting there and focusing and pouring in that magical energy to regain those armor slots. And now you've got your magical runes back. That works the same way throughout the game on so many things. You want to play a race that's not in the existed ancestries. You want to create an ancestry. For example, I'm a big fan of anthropomorphic animal people, and evidently so is Darrington Press. They've got many options for you to look at, and I think with the flavoring the game, you could. With the existing ancestries, I would challenge anybody to give me a anthropomorphic race that they could not apply to one of those, to reskin one of the existing races. And if that doesn't work, you can easily take and do a mixed heritage to give you even more options than just the 13. You take a mixed ancestry and combine two of those abilities, one top and one bottom, from two different ancestries, and I don't think anybody would be able to give me anything off the top of my head that would stump me. I'm sure we could come up with multiple options for whatever animal person you wanted to create, and that goes just as well for any other type of ancestry you wanted to create that wasn't there. I mean, you've got fairies that can fly, so anything that can fly. If it needs to be able to breathe underwater, you've got rivets. I mean, there's characters that have there's ancestries that have armored bodies. There's a pretty good list there that I think you would be hard pressed to not be able to work in whatever reskinning you wanted to. And once the actual full rules come out, I'm sure that they will even give us, I'm sure it's there. You can look in the beta and see we got the sections there that are to come. There will be rules on how to create your own options for this game. I have no doubt. Whenever it fully comes out, until that time, until the spring of 2025, work with your table, work with your GM, work with your players. Follow the fiction. There's no reason to squash somebody's creative juices. There's just really not in this game. So let them bring you what they want to do, and then figure out how to do it best. And if you're a player and you're not sure and you've got an idea, bring it to your game master. Say, hey, I want to do X, Y, or Z, but I don't know how we can make that work. Get with the people at your table. Collaborate. That's what Daggerheart is about. If there is a will, there is a way. The other thing that I was going to mention is with the way advantage and disadvantage works in this game, you get to either add a d6 or subtract a d6 to the roll. That's what advantage gives you, an extra d6 that you get to add to the total. Disadvantage takes away a d6 from the total. My suggestion is that whenever you're setting up to roll, when you've got your tokens and you're putting your modifiers over there, you've got your hope and your fear dice. So set aside your 6-siders for your hope and fear dice, right? Leave those for rolling advantage and rolling disadvantage. Otherwise, for any other d6 rolls, use different colors than your hope and fear dice. Save your same colored 6-siders for rolling advantage or disadvantage, and let them be the same colors as your hope and fear. This is my recommendation to you. This will solve a lot of problems of accidental, like, oh, I don't know which one was supposed to be the advantage dice, or, oh, I rolled 3 dice and I said that one was the disadvantage, but I don't know because they're mixed up now. And yeah, so easy way to avoid that is only roll, make your advantage and disadvantage dice the same color as your hope and fear dice, and reserve that for advantage and disadvantage. That's my suggestion. That is, you can take that or leave it. It's not something in the book, just something that as a GM with 43 years of experience, I saw it and was like, that would be that would be a easy way to remember what dice you're using for advantage and what dice you're using for disadvantage, is to make them the same colors as your hope and fear dice, and those will be up to the players as well. You do need a distinct color on your hope and fear. Technically I guess you could do it as long as you had different colored numbers. You could have 2 red d20s and one of them have white and one of them have black. I would go more distinctive and go 2 different colored dice, but you can work that out at your table, and whatever works for your table, that's the only people it matters to. Make it work out at your table, and you're good to go. So I think that will cover our shared understanding section. If you have any questions as far as flavoring your game, things like that, feel free to send me a message. I will be putting together, after the series is over and I'm going through and reporting on my campaigns and taking questions from people. I'll be happy to answer any questions or give my advice to any situations moving forward. So I'm happy to be here and help. I do have Cole here watching live. Cole, off the top of your head, is there anything that you might be questioning that you think I could answer for you in the moment that would regard either concepts over questions over the core realms, or magic and spells, tokens, game cards, flavoring the game? All right, we're gonna give Cole just a moment here, see if he does want to ask anything to add, and then if not, we will wrap this episode up here. I'll get it edited and uploaded to YouTube, and then we will be back later this evening with our next episode, which I believe we're going to jump in next with covering the ancestries. I think we'll do ancestries next, and then we'll do communities. A bit out of order, but I think that will go. We can cover. I think we can cover the ancestries in one episode, maybe a little long, but I think we can get it done. And then communities, I think, is easy to cover in one episode. I think that should not be too big of a problem. And then when we get to classes, probably what we will do is we will break down and do groups of 3, probably. We'll see how long they take. But we'll break down the classes into smaller groups. If we need to do one class per episode, then that's what we'll do. I'm thinking we can probably do a couple classes per episode. And we will probably cover the domain first level abilities with the relevant... well, there's going to be some overlap there, so we may do domains just separately at the end. We'll have to see. I'm not quite certain on that yet. We may get far enough to get to those this evening. I definitely have confidence that we'll get through ancestries and that we'll get through communities tonight. My goal is to have all of the character creation stuff done this weekend. So all of the episodes up for all the classes, domains covered, classes covered, ancestries covered, and communities covered, as well as, let's see, what else is there that we need to go over? We need to go over experiences. That will be its own episode. We will go over, let me look, referencing the player, the beta real quick. So we'll cover subclasses in the classes. We'll go over heritage, basically is your ancestry and community, which that's technically step 2, which we're going to cover before we cover the classes. Then we also will do an episode going over traits. Actually, we can go over traits right now. Let's go ahead and fold assigning character traits into this right here. So character traits. You don't roll for character traits in Daggerheart. Every player gets to assign a +2, 2 +1s, 2 zeros, and a -1 to your attributes. The attributes are agility, which I think the attributes are pretty self-explanatory. Agility covers your agility. How fast are you on your feet? Are you nimble? Are you quick to react to danger? Sprinting, leaping, maneuvers. Those types of things are agility. Strength, feats of strength, lifting, smashing, grappling, other things that would naturally be physical prowess and fortitude. Finesse is going to be your motor skills, dexterous, your hand-eye coordination, your reflexes. Those types of things are finesse. Anything about being precise, careful, quiet, those kinds of things, that's going to be finesse. Instinct is going to cover your instinct is going to be your perceptions, your senses, your ability to navigate, knowledge that comes from your gut, natural intuition. Some depending on, and your classes will dictate which of these attributes is going to be used for spell casting or your abilities, and sometimes those even can be different. I do believe we'll go over this as we go over this, but I do believe that there are situations where you may have, depending on your subclass, a different attribute that is your primary attribute for that subclass. It may just be classes, but we'll know by the end of this series. But yes, so you've got finesse, you've got instinct, which once again, your danger senses, how you notice details around you in the world, and those natural intuition type situation. Presence is going to be your charm, your ability to perform, to get people to persuade people, to deceive people. If it's something that requires social interactions, things like that, presence is going to carry some weight. Intimidation generally is based on presence, although you could always argue something else, depending on what you're doing. But generally, presence is going to control your social dynamic roles. Then knowledge is pretty self-explanatory. It's anything you've learned. So your recall, your ability to analyze and comprehend, high knowledge skill is a learned individual. Could you be intelligent and not be knowledgeable? Yes, of course you can. You probably have either a high instinct or presence, but knowledge is your learned information, and how you apply that, deduction, reasoning. Those are all going to be your knowledge type roles. So you are going to want to distribute those. A +2, a +1, a +1, a 0, a 0, and a 1. So those are going to be your starting attributes. And I think that's good. Everybody needs a foil. I know there's some people that very much groan at a negative, and it can ruin their day because they think and they just dread that there's something that's going to have a negativity to it. But think of it in the terms of your fiction. Think of it in the terms of who you are creating, because that's really what you want to, throughout the whole character creation process, really you want to come back to the idea of who it is you're wanting to play, and then make these other decisions, all of these other decisions, based on that idea you have of who you want to be. And an interesting character is gonna have something that they struggle with, that that's not their strength. And I would encourage you to let that exist throughout the game. Let them have a weakness. Let them have something they don't shine in. There will be somebody else in the group that will cover that. I have no doubt. You got a group of of 4 or 5 people, potentially 6, even with 2 or 3, chances are not everybody is going to have the same -1. And if it does happen, that's okay too. It just means that your group is not good at that thing. And whenever it comes time for that thing, you will either have to hopefully rely on the help of outsiders, allies, NPCs, or you will adjust accordingly, because you will come to find out that your principal characters, you and your partners, are not good at X, Y, or Z. And so maybe that is time to bring in some outside help, or avoid things that require heavily, on that negative, that space where the whole group is lacking. But what would you do in the fiction? What would you do in the real world if you found yourself and your buddies, nobody has any mechanical knowledge? You call a mechanic. You get somebody that knows what they're doing. If that's not an option, you make the best of a bad situation, or sometimes you just figure out a different situation. But that is an overview of your attributes, your starting stats on what you have to place in those. And those are going to be your modifiers that you add to your duality dice. And I know some people are if they're used to playing something like Dungeons and Dragons, they're going to look at that and they're going to be, oh my goodness. But you got to remember, this system is totally different than Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, you're used to making a lot of rolls that you're not ever going to make in Daggerheart. Daggerheart, you are already at level 1. You are a hero. You are a principal character. You are a protagonist. You already are legit. Okay, most people are not. Most people are zeros. Most people are average, and then they might have a +1. They might have a -1, but for the most part, everybody's kind of doing their thing. You, principal characters, are already above. Your domain abilities, the amount of hit points you have, your resilience, you are already a hero. And you're only going to get more powerful. So, a lot of times, and this is very important, and this is going to be a hard thing for a lot of GMs to wrap their head around, and a lot of players, it's going to be a hard thing to wrap your heads around, is that the things you're good at, if there's not a reason for me to, as a storyteller, to need an impactful role, whether you can open this lock or not, you're a lock picker. You built that into your character. This is what you do. This is your thing. If that's your thing, then if there's not a reason for me or the story to have a question mark of, can you pick that lock, then you pick the lock. You just do it. You don't make a roll. You don't have a situation where, I don't know. There's nothing interesting going to come from you failing this lock pick, right? And I'm using lock picking as an example. This can go for anything that your character is good at. You're good at sneaking. You're good at climbing. Whatever it is you're good at. Let the characters shine at the things that they're good at. That way, whenever you do make the rolls, whenever you do call for a roll to do the thing that they do, they know it's impactful. They know it has meaning. Because you're not just letting it happen. There's a situation that if this doesn't go well, something interesting could occur. If you're making reaction rolls, those are different than rolling your duality dice for hope and fear. Reaction rolls are whenever you need to roll something to determine what already exists or is already out there. Say somebody wants to know what they're seeing, right? That's a reaction roll. If you want to make a perception roll, a presence roll, or no, actually that would be an instinct roll. My apologies. Perception check, instinct roll. You would roll your duality dice. You'd add your modifiers, everything just like you were rolling an action roll. But as a reaction roll, you do not generate fear if you roll with fear. You do not generate hope if you roll with hope. You just simply roll the dice to find out what that target, what your total is, so you can then, the storyteller can inform you of whatever that roll was needed for, if there is a question, instead of a just blanket, here's what you see, here's what you know. There will be, and I probably did not do a great job of explaining that, and that's because this wasn't really my section where we were going to talk about reaction rolls and the duality rolls and things like that. So, back to those attributes: a +2, a +1, a +1, a 0, and a -1. More than likely, you're going to put your +1 in whatever the focus is for your character, although you don't have to. Maybe you want to play a character that's, you're playing a wizard, but he's not starting out as a good wizard, and you always wanted and thought you were going to be a warrior, or maybe that's what you wanted to do, but and maybe your character is physically strong. You put your +2 in strength because you want to be physically strong, because that's the idea you have for your character. But he's a wizard, and you're going to put a 0 in his knowledge. That's an acceptable choice for you to make. If that's what you want to do, you're free to do it, and you do not have to always maximize your character. In some cases, depending on the character you want to play, you may not want to maximize your character. But make sure that is something that you will have fun doing. And if you are going to play somebody that is taking on a role for the group, and you're putting a negative into your main role, you should let people know that you're doing that as well. That way they can be aware of it, and if they do have a problem with that, they can bring it up to you. And because we are telling a collaborative game, and you want to make sure that your decisions are not going to impede someone else's joy at the table as well. And if you are playing a team where everybody's kind of taken on a archetypical role of an adventurer, and you are the wizard, but you're really bad at wizard and knowledge stuff, and you're not going to be good at it until maybe you figure maybe halfway through the campaign, you'll start you're going to be pumping things into it as you go, but you're never going to be the grand mage that is, the guy who started with the +2 and is focused and driven his whole, you'll never be that shining star. But will you still be a very capable wizard? Yes, you will. Will you be able to do what you want to do? You will be able to. Will it come at a cost? It very well could. So get your group on board if you're playing something that is counterintuitive, or if you are doing something unusual. It's best to, and this is just in general, it's best to include the other players, even if it is and you want it to remain a mystery to the characters in the fiction. Have the consent of your fellow players. Let them be in on it and help you create and tell the story you want to tell. All right. So Cole has left me no questions. So I think I have done enough here, and we are going to call this episode 2. And we will be back later after we've got everything updated, uploaded, and edited, and processed to YouTube. We will come back and we will hit you with episode 3, Ancestries Live. We'll see you here after a bit. This is Rollinwolf signing off.